Let me tell you a little bit about the engine I've got in my truck. Now, I ordered this truck brand new in 2003. It was one of the first 2004s to come off the line. And I ordered the 475 cat engine, but I didn't realize until the truck came that it would be an MBN engine rather than a 6NZ. Now basically the only difference was between that motor and the one I've got had a slightly different camshaft, a slightly different turbo, but basically it was a detuned 6NZ. Now Caterpillar had done this because at that time the Environmental Protection Association, the EPA, was demanding reduced emissions on trucks starting in 2004. This was one of the first 2004s. This truck was spec'd for reliability, and that was why I bought the cat engine. Now the MBN engine was kind of a maligned engine because everyone liked the 6NZ so much better, but basically there's hardly any difference. This was a detuned 6NZ motor. What I liked about it, and what I've liked about all the cats that I've had, was the reliability of the engine. And you know, I took proper care of them, I maintained them. I didn't find that this engine particularly worked very much differently than the 6NZ that I had before. So I was very happy with the engine. I didn't spec it for fuel mileage or anything like that. I spec'd it for reliability. This engine has been that for me. It's got over 1 million miles on it. Could go to the coast tomorrow. But it was a good, reliable engine, and I maintain all my engines as much as I possibly can because I think that's a lot of where the reliability comes from. Now, I mentioned that this engine, and Caterpillar called these bridge engines because basically they were trying to bridge from the 6NZ over to what was going to be the Assert engine in later years. But this one still had the single turbo setup, and I was quite happy with that. My friends and I, a couple of them, had the KTTA Cummins engines back in the day, which were a twin turbo setup. And we found that after a little while, the second turbo would starve for oil and start to seize up. And that was an expensive repair, even back then. And now with these Assert engines that came along after this, they also had gone to a twin turbo setup, and to replace one of those twin turbos on the Assert motors was over $7,000 just in parts alone. Now this engine has the same crankshaft and the same ECM as a 6NZ and a slightly different camshaft. But basically, I was after reliability and pulling power, and this thing pulled like Jack the Bear, just like the last 6NZ did before it. I wasn't concerned with top end speed, I was concerned with reliability, and these big cat engines always got me there, every time. And they had great resale. They had the best resale of any engine that you could hang in between the frame rails back then. One of the things I noticed about these big cat engines that I really liked was, and bear in mind fuel was a whole lot less expensive back in the day, but if you were out in Nebraska or Wyoming and you were fighting a headwind, the Cummins and the Detroits would basically fall off. They couldn't even hold their speed. These big cat motors just kept pulling away and chugging even harder, and the turbo pressure would go up and up. You never lost any speed. It suffered in the fuel mileage a little bit, but back then fuel wasn't a big issue. And they would just pull like Jack the Bear, even in a strong headwind or up a hill. Today, these big cat engines are still the most sought after engines by guys, particularly owner-operators that have prides in their rides, because it's just a good, all-around, strong pulling motor. As I say, this is basically a 6NZ, a detuned one. I never felt the need for any more power than what this thing had. You could dial it up or dial it down. I could dial it up from 475 if I wanted to. I'd go to cat for that. I left it at 475 because it always had more than enough power for me, and it was reliable as hell all day long. I use this engine in all sorts of applications countrywide. It's run in the prairies, it's run in the mountains, it's run in the eastern seaboard, it's run everywhere. And no matter where I ran this motor, it always had enough power to do the job that I was asking it to. And that's part of the reason that cats now are still widely sought after engines in trucks. Drivers seek out cat engines primarily for their performance, and they still outperform most of the modern engines today, and they're still cheaper to rebuild and fix, and you can work on them on the side of the road if you have to. And guys now will buy old trucks just for the cat engines in them. rather than worry about what kind of truck it's in. Long story short, it's not a 6NZ motor. I found it just fine. I don't malign the MBN engines at all. It was just as good as the 6NZ I had before it. It gave me no trouble, and I'd recommend those engines to anyone. Stay safe. If you've got one of these C-15 Cat engines, hang on to it, because they're going to be worth big money for years to come. Keep the rubber side down, and I'll see you on the back haul.